Across the state of New Jersey, they had 14 incinerators supposedly to be built. Only 4 got built because of the popular opposition and community organizing. We do win. The wins are wonderful. Also, what's wonderful is the changes in people as you go through a community organizing process. The way that it changes their lives. You look at the women who started that daycare center, you talk to them, and they will tell you that their lives were forever changed by the sense of power they got from what happened to them. I will stop because I could talk for the entire night. And I love talking about this, and I'll be happy to talk to people after, I guess, or in discussion.
Richard?
Thank you, Gerard. It's so unusual to see Nancy talking so much.
And we have a self-introduction policy. So.
Self-introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Camerari. I work for the Community Corporation, lifelong resident of Newark, and all that stuff. So I'm here to talk a little bit about New Community, I guess. I've been with New Community since 1998, which is pretty amazing, 10 years plus. I was not at New Community's founding in 1967. I wasn't too far away. I was a callow youth of 16 at the time, living on Bruce Street between Cabinet and 12th Avenue. I like to tell people when I grew up there, it was probably, I was born in 1951, maybe about 75% white working class people. The rest African American. And by the time went on, it became 99.9% African American. But at the very end, it was 100% white because my family was the last family on the block. The block hadn't been taken over by the medical school. And irony of ironies, the block was never built on by the medical school. It stayed vacant for years and years until, I guess, PCCI or CAC finally built some rental housing there about 10 years ago or so. Anyway, New Community was founded in 60, it was actually incorporated in 1968, so it was celebrating its 40th anniversary last year. Monsignor William Linder was not the end-all and be-all of New Community's founding. Don't tell him I said that. But we're being taped, so it's too late.
Good working, Rich.
The genesis of New Community was actually in the parish of Queen of Angels, from everything I've spoken and read. Queen of Angels is a very special history in Newark in terms of Roman Catholic religion. Many of you might know there aren't too many African Americans who are Roman Catholic, but Queen of Angels was a parish that was specifically created in the 1920s to accommodate black parishioners. As they say, Sunday morning is usually the most segregated time, even within religions. Interesting enough, my family, we grew up near St. Joseph Parish, which at the time, we had similar kind of ethnic segregation because one of my aunts, the younger one, was not able to get her sacraments at St. Joseph Parish. Being Italian, she had to go to St. Rocco's, which is on Huntington Street. But Queen of Angels was a parish that Father Linder got to in the early 60s. I think there was one black priest. I know people here can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a genesis of organizing through a number of, it tapped into a couple of things. One was kind of the beginnings of liberation theology within Catholic theology, which obviously became much more popular and took hold in Latin America, particularly Central America. But also the civil rights movement. There was a lot of ferment, obviously, at the time throughout the 60s in Newark. The black parishioners at Queen of Angels were quite active. You had people like Joe Cheneyfield, Willie Wright, who were key in terms of the creation of New Community. I do believe that, I think Ken Gibson was also on the first board of that. Somebody told me that once. But so it had a strong roots in the community, people who were strongly involved both in the labor movement and civil rights. And when the rebellion happened in '67, obviously that coalesced a lot of things. From New Community's point of view, the people who were there seemed to focus primarily on gathering people together and to organize them with a variety of meetings, surveys, that kind of thing, to see what were the main issues. And the main issues, not surprisingly enough, you have the big five usually with any urban issues, probably with any issues at all, is housing, healthcare, education, employment, crime, safety. What turned out to be the most pressing needs based upon community input, people who showed up, was housing and childcare. Thus, Babyland was one of the things that spun off from the community, was created at that time. Babyland was separated corporately from the community about 7 or 8 years ago. And housing, the community, the model it used for housing in terms of getting started was funding in terms of both government funding, and obviously being in the late 60s, early 70s was a good time to be around looking for government funding. There was a lot of funding around. It's given the trajectory of our history in this country, not much happens without some level of confrontation and unfortunately violence. Given the numerous rebellions throughout the country in the 60s, the feds came up with dope to try to tamp things down. Not dissimilar to what happened in the early 90s with the whole Rodney King issue. We had Los Angeles blowing up in 90 or 91, and all of a sudden we have enterprise zones and all these millions of dollars available. So that's another lecture. But new community pulled people together, residents, and it was a pretty much your usual community organizing model, having meetings, discussing what the issues were, and creating a board which was comprised of people from the community. I don't know all the names, but again, people like Joe Chaneyfield, Willie Wright were on this board. The funding included not just government funding, but some interesting wrinkles in terms of private funds. But one of the things I know Monsignor Linder always talks about is that, I forget what company it was, but they came to offer a grant, and they said, no, we don't want a grant, we want a loan, which is one of the things the community started to do, is to get loans instead of grants to build up a sort of a credit history. It also captured a model that it borrowed from funding in terms of Israel, where the Israelis would sell, what was it, trees or something like that? They would raise funds for trees in Israel. So what New Community did was sold bricks, Brick City, right? This is before Brick City became popular. They would sell symbolic bricks in the Central Ward to suburban, and mainly through parishes out in the suburbs, to gain money. It took a while. People don't realize that New Community was incorporated in '68, and its first housing was not built until 1975. That was Holmes Court, which actually some of you may have read about recently, which is coming down. It is being closed and demolished, and that's a whole other lecture too. So, but the first housing was built in '75, and then fairly quickly, within about 7 or 8 years, most of the rest of the New Community's housing in the Central Ward and West Ward was developed and constructed. We do have, I guess, about 2,000 units roughly of housing that's affordable, nice rental housing, affordable for low and moderate income affordability. I don't use the word affordable housing anymore because that means nothing. Who's affordable for who? So you really have to be specific. And then in succession, New Community moved into various other service areas. Healthcare is probably one of its largest area right now with its extended care program, the nursing home on South Orange Avenue, Family Service, Visiting Nurse Association, workforce development, for-profit spin-offs that it created, the Pathmark in 1990, the Priory restaurant in '84. The Priory is also closed now. Don't go to the Priory for lunch because you won't get any food. Until further notice, it is closed. Although it's still open on Friday nights. So get a little marketing going in here too. So in the beginning, in terms of organizing, New Community was your basic model of getting people together to respond to a very particular need. And at the time, in the '60s, it was, I say this often because people always ask me, my full introduction to organizing happened when I graduated at Rutgers Newark in '73. I began working with the Quest Services program, which also spun out of Queen of Angels, ironically enough. But then my full baptism and fire was when I began working with the Newark Coalition for Neighborhoods in 1980. As I mentioned, Becky was one of the incorporators of that organization, which is a citywide coalition of groups like La Casa, Unified Bailsburg, Ironbound, Tri-City, etc. I would also mention, in terms of history of some of these groups, there is a pretty interesting dissertation by a woman named Julia Rabig, where she concentrates on 3 organizations. One is New Community, one is Tri-City, and one is Coweta Towers, in terms of the Baraka's work, which is a little later, as in sort of early '70s, but it has some interesting information there with interviews too.